Hi, everybody. Welcome to my channel, Hanzl's House of Stories. Today, I have with me Anastasia Wasko. She is a writer, editor, and oh my goodness, and now, of course, my phone just went away because I want to get the term correct. Writer, editor, and transpersonal guide. So welcome to my new channel. I've known you for a long time. That's what I wanted to start with. I cannot remember what year exactly we met in a writing class.
And that would have been 2011, May 2011.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And we took more than one, right, with her?
Sarah, that was my first year in the Hudson Valley. I had moved there from Jersey City.
Okay. And what happened was I worked with you. You reached out to me last summer to proofread your book, Meta Work. And I definitely thought of you right away when I thought of doing this channel, interviewing the authors I've worked with. I will have to say you are one of the most interesting people I've met. From your look to your experiences in life, your travels, languages you speak, and your writing. And I want to say your style is so unique, and it actually made me, I wrote this down. I've never read a writer like you. I really haven't. And you've made me more brave in my writing and also my editing, where now when I'm working with people, if I see something and I'm like, well, that's not typical. Is that the correct form? Did they started the sentence this way? I'm like, no, let's a little more artistic license with writing, which with my background in speech pathology and just like being very like academic, I'm like rules, grammar rules, all these rules. So it really made me more brave with editing and my own writing.
That's amazing. Oh.
Yeah. So as I said before, you are the author of Meta Work, which is autofiction, which I don't think I'd ever heard of till you said it to me. I was like, okay, I'm going to have to Google that. You also, why don't you tell everyone else what else you've published? Because I also worked with you on your workbook called The Practice.
Yes.
So
you worked with me on The Practice, which is a guide that I use in my work with individuals and in groups, but it is a short work on this worldview and the method that I teach and that I use. I take the idea that everything is energy and I ground it in knowledge from Vedic cosmology. So I'm not just saying, hey, like, let's, bring in the good vibes, work with our chakras, I ground it in research and in lineage. And so in this short guidebook, it provides an overview of how I teach, considering that everything is energy. Anything could be medicine. Words are energy in medicine. And we start to go into the feedback loop of what's happening in the mind, in the body, and also what the impressions upon the soul are. So ultimately, I want people to be happy and free. And when you come to my workshops or when I teach, I say that we're going to revise your narrative. We're going to work a little bit with your narrative, but sometimes that means getting into the belly and exploring the sensations there and writing out different scenarios for maybe what those sensations in the belly brought up. Or we're going to do a little daydreaming and co-create and manifest or envision. You can't really step into the next best version of yourself if you don't know what that looks like. And this comes out of my experience and love of autofiction, because in Meta Work, for example, I actually started Meta Work in that writing workshop that we were there together. At the time, I thought I was just doing, nonfiction, maybe a memoir, but I couldn't tell the story that I wanted to tell, and I couldn't really feel comfortable in some of the constricted forms of traditional language. I started to write meta work as a way to explore some mental health issues that I was having, and I just really wanted to see them on the paper, and then I could let them go. And then I will kind of spoil the end of meta work, but in doing autofiction and writing meta work, I decided to make the last chapter something that's never happened before as part of that co-creating, envisioning process. And maybe it'll come to pass, maybe it won't. It doesn't matter. But it gave me the experience of saying, okay, like, I don't like this. I don't know how to get there. Like, what's going on inside? Let me please clean out all of this stuff I have. And just that act of putting, not just writing, but putting things on the page and have it reflect the chaos that I had in my mind. That was the catharsis. That was the me as the narrator, me as the main person in the story, and doing the navel gazing, but saying, hey, this is what's going on. And so here's how my story is written from that point of view. And it just really changed a lot for me. And so that's autofiction. When you're taking yourself into the main narrator, you can blur the lines between reality and imagination, fiction, nonfiction. It doesn't matter. It's kind of this just really fluid kind of sort of label. You don't know what it is. It's not memoir. It's autofiction. Like you're there. Yeah, it's autofiction. So that's the end result. That is the destination. But the journey is discussed in the workbook that you also worked on last year. It's sort of like finding spirituality through creativity, sort of like a Julia Cameron artist way, but with a little bit more worldview inside. So those are the two books that I produced with Planet Dust, which is my micro publisher. But I also have other work out. I have another work of autofiction that was published in 2002, which is 713. And I've got some speculative fiction, got short stories out, and I'm looking over my shoulder because they're somewhere. Those books are somewhere on that shelf.
Cool.
Anything that plays with reality, but also looks at language as a way to create reality and to journey inside and outside without maybe physically going anywhere, and changing your experience, and hopefully changing your experience so that you can be a little more happy and free inside.
Yeah, it's like with the practice, I said it was like incorporating writing with self-discovery. It's a total holistic approach of really producing, writing, I guess, letting the writing come out of you in the most really authentic, I think, way, and people getting in touch with themselves through this. What is your, I definitely want to go back to meta work and stuff, but what is your training in the part with the, transpersonal, and what have you studied? And do you know what I'm asking? I feel like I can't get the question out right.
So my background is in transpersonal psychology with a strong interest in parapsychology as well. My bachelor's is in transpersonal psychology, and then my master's that I'm currently working on is in psychosynthesis psychology. And I should also frame the transpersonal as a term that I use loosely to say anything that goes beyond the personality, beyond the ego. It can be a transpersonal experience when you're out walking in the woods and suddenly have that sensation of connection to the trees, to the earth, something greater than yourself.
Like connection with your higher self, maybe?
Yeah, totally.
Higher self, or just beyond yourself.
Yeah, just anything beyond yourself, that layer of personality that says, okay, this is the box that I'm living in, and this is what the world is going to look like today.
Yeah.
Psychosynthesis psychology is a really beautiful form of psychology. It's a depth psychology. So just like Freudian psychoanalysis, Jungian psychology and archetypes and symbols, etc., So they all kind of work with the stuff that's inside, that's in the mind, maybe not always, immediately conscious or present, something that's in the subconscious, but, well, they don't look at the mind as simply a bunch of parts, like cogs in a machine, right? Psychosynthesis says that the self, our personality, and who we think we are is constantly evolving. It is a process. And at some point, maybe through a spiritual awakening or even through an emotional awakening, I'd say, you go through some of these really incredible changes, and inside, maybe what your day-to-day normal experience might be, maybe it changes, and you kind of then just go outside of yourself. And again, with the connection, tapping into a larger divine source of energy, knowing that we're here on this, third rock from the sun in this meat suit, but like we're actually super special because like we're kind of stars inside these meat suits and sun, So psychosynthesis psychology, just when I'm working with people, we do a lot of guided meditation and reflection activities that bring you into that inner space, and sometimes even that is like a lot. So whether it's good, whether it's bad, whether you're sitting in one of my workshops and I'm saying, okay, we're going to meditate with the fire for 15, 20 minutes. And someone might be, I can't sit still for 20 minutes. That's cool. Because then your job is just to notice that you're sitting there thinking like, I can't sit still. I can't sit still. And eventually maybe you get a little distance from that thought. Maybe you tap into the witness consciousness where you're just a little bit distanced. So this is the psychology of and thinking about the mind as well as the body as a whole experience or an ecosystem. And as a guide, I often work with people who have arrived through these altered states or strange experiences organically. So maybe somebody is going through something, or maybe, something in their body, like something that has happened to them. A lot of times people will access the transpersonal through psychedelics or some sort of supported therapy. But again, I tend to stay with the more organic. But that's not to say, either route is better than the other. Right. It's all valid because there's something more. I keep doing this. There's something more than just what's immediately here. So I'm gonna not gonna wave anymore. I made my point. Yeah.
No, that's all right. It sounds like too you do a little bit so you look beyond, but also some grounding as well.
Absolutely.
Like, you do the combo. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you have to, because this stuff is bug out, and sometimes, I do get a lot of people who come to me and say like, I don't know who else to talk to, but somebody told me to talk to you. And an hour conversation of bearing witness to someone is the medicine that they needed. And then to get them back into the body and back into the mind and, just making sense. A lot of times when it's not just narrative change, but a lot of times in narrative change, but when you have something happen and it's in direct conflict with your worldview or the perception of who you thought you were, or you have to change, like you have to fold them. Sometimes we're put up against forces greater than us, like climate change, like economic disparity. You just have to fold. And that's uncomfortable because you either want to not deal with it or you have to grow. And then if you're growing, well, then who are you growing into and what are you leaving behind? So that can take people, again, out of their normal comfort zone and sometimes into opening, especially into emotional openings that they might not have been able to reach before. So I'm like, that's cool. Let's talk about it. Then I'll make you write about it too.
That's awesome. I love it. Sorry. I'm in my home. I think it's just, they're not in this room, but I can hear them very well. Sorry. I got distracted.
The bell on the streetcar. I'm in New Orleans right now.
Right. Yeah. Oh, wow. I don't hear that. So that's cool.
It's cute.
I wanted to I actually just wanted to go back to MetaWork because I just want to read one little sentence, just to kind of maybe tease your style a little bit. Of writing. I know there's other parts too, but this one, just because I started to look into the book again, as I told you earlier, I haven't obviously read it in over a year because when I was working on it. But I like this part. It says, I started to breathe again as city noises melted into my skin, dripped from the sky, echoed off the streets, repelled on the buildings. I just love that because that is how you feel. And it's talking about New York City.
Yeah.
You just can so feel it. Like you just can feel everything. You feel enclosed by the buildings and everything just does come onto your body. Like that melted into my skin. I love that. I just wanted to read that part. Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, that's okay. What were you going to say? What were you going to say?
The things that I love and that is a massive part of my self-care practice and has been for like 25 years is movement. And I love going to these festivals with music or even just dances. I danced a lot in New York City. I love ecstatic dance. I love these sober festivals where everyone is there to kind of just like get into their body. But the cool thing about these parties or these festivals is that they're immersive. And so the experience is supposed to be like, there's visuals, there's really amazing tracks, like you're watching people like go into themselves. And while I tend to be a bit onomatopoeic when I write, just because I like, like I hear sounds or I hear something, I'm like, oh, what is that? What would that look like in a letter? Like, let me try that. Mm-hmm. That's why there's so much, observation. When I was working on meta work, I was like, when I decided, okay, it's not going to be a memoir, it's going to be something else. And then I came into autofiction. I was like, I want to drop people into the experience of someone having sensory overload, maybe a meltdown, lots of disorganized thoughts, not being able to tell the forest from the trees. Because when we're talking about mental health, and in my case, it's been bipolar disorder, it's not easy to live with that, but it's more than just the highs and the lows. And I've been in recovery for about 9 years now, meaning I'm stable and I can manage the symptoms and I have really high quality of life. But it's not easy because in my case, there are those in-between moments where I'm like, I might look fine on the outside, but I'm like, can't really tell what's reality or not right now. But that is an immersive experience. And so when I was working on meta work, thinking of dancing, thinking of how I truly wanted to represent this, that's why I really turned up the immersive style of writing. And I'm glad that I did that. That was intuitive. And again, it started with me just needing to see my reality on paper and not have to, write it like other people write about mental illness or bipolar disorder, because that's not my case. I bear witness and with my yoga practice and all of my training, I interact with the disorder in a different way. But I was like, but how can I tell that story and how can I be true to this experience? I got to drop y'all into it then. Like, cause that's what it's like. Sometimes you're walking around and it's like freaking bug out, not the character was bugging out. Like, no, here it is. Have your own experience.
Yeah. The reader is immersed into it and experiencing it. And it's awesome. Because it really made me feel, I believe how you felt, which you don't really see that in books about mental health. It brings an awareness, and a lot of people don't talk a lot about, you hear bipolar disorder a little more, but people really don't talk about it. And you really immerse the reader. When I was proofreading it, I could feel it. I would actually be tired and feel like I was hot, like I was there in the city with you. And I would have to step away. I'm like, I'm exhausted, from it. Yeah. I mean, exactly. So it's a really amazing, amazing book. I can't recommend it enough. And it's not very long, so it's not overwhelming. And I also, the cover is just so cool.
Shout out to Sharon Wasko. She did an amazing job. No relation. Weirdly, yeah.
How did you find her? Just coincidentally.
You know what?
That she has your last name.
I was vending for a while. I was selling my mom's art in Hudson Valley, and I was vending at a holiday show at Cornell Street Studios in Midtown Kingston. And she came up to me and she was like passing out something, like maybe she was trying to get like an art thing going or something. And then we were like, wait a minute, like, you're a Wasko? I'm a Wasko, both from New Jersey. We can't figure out where it's so weird, but she's awesome. And I threw her a couple of photos, and so she made this collage. She gave me a couple of options, but I think this one that I chose that she did also emulated that sort of chaos. And what's really cool, what's really funny is that there's a picture on the cover of a mannequin. So true story. I took that picture probably in like 2012, 2013, walking up Fifth Avenue. It was in the window display of like Bergdorf Goodman or something. I love those window displays. So I took that picture and I added it to the collection, and she chose it. Turns out, I found out last spring, I was talking to my best friend Temple, who works at the Neon Light Bright Studio, also in Midtown Kingston, right? And I was talking to her about recommending the studio. And so I was like, oh, let me just check the website. And she was giving me information. That mannequin and the neon around the mannequin was done by Light Bright Studio. So I'm just like, what?
Oh my gosh.
Like,
that's crazy.
That's super special, like.
Yes, that is.
And, to me, that's meaningful. Wow. And then I put it there, and so this is where, too, the book felt really charmed because, again, the text that I started with actually started in 2011, right? And and then it just wasn't working. It wasn't working. And then when it worked, so many of these little synchronicities popped up. And in my worldview, they're meaningful. And I think that people don't, you can choose your own adventure, like maybe make them meaningful or maybe just overlook them like, coincidences. It depends on the level and the depth that you want to allow yourself to open to this sense of interconnectedness. And then ultimately, too, make talking about stuff like this not weird. I think a lot of people also just brush mental health, mental illness, or just weird thought, like under the rug, like, I don't know what they're talking about, whatever, like, potato, like, but not really, because, if we ultimately, meta work is an act of compassion and kindness. So if you can see my inner world, and then if you know someone who's bipolar or just struggling, like, and know that that's what their inner world feels like, their experience in moving through the world, being on this third rock from the sun, then I would hope it cultivates a little more compassion. And it also allows people to see change. I believe everything can change, and just in the darkest dark, like, I still will say, I'm faking it. Everything will change, but like, you'll get through this. And I think that if we could also just open up the worldview that we have, it would change the way that we look at people who are going through stuff, whether it's a chronic condition or momentary environmental or like, situation induced, like situationship. I just really wanted to offer that. And then I want to also talk about creative authority and like getting the, the market, the embodied market, and like, you have to make money and it has to look a certain way and you have to be a published author.
Right.
but I'll let you slide in some questions.
Yeah, sure. No, it's great. It's great. This like the not on the topic of meta work. Just what was the first thing you remember writing ever?
Oh my God, it was
like your name or a story. Like what?
Totally a sci-fi story on this busted up typewriter. I have it too. It's I don't know where yeah, I have it. It's on this like yellow lined paper, and like the letters like jump, and it talks about me being at school and being bored, and then meeting an alien and going off and having adventures. So I'm like, that's pretty on like,
yeah, definitely consistent.
Go me, like, because that's kind of cute.
That is.
Because I typed age 7. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Oh, that's awesome. Oh my gosh. My son is 7. That's amazing. Typing on the
give him a pen, give him a typewriter. Would he even know?
Oh yeah, I mean he loves to create. He knows what we had a typewriter and he was obsessed with it. But like it just kind of sat there and he would type on it. I mean, he would just kind of hit at it and stuff. And we got rid of it. We have too much stuff. We did get rid of it because it just sat there. And he's like, once in a while, he was like, "Where's the typewriter?" I'm like, "I don't know."
Oh, sorry. There's some of the stuff over there.
But no, yeah, he knows. He knows what. But yeah, he's a creative kid. He loves to create.
Nice.
He does like to duplicate books and stuff and write stuff, but he did want a journal and he wrote a little, but he's not there yet. Like doesn't want it. He would more like rather create with, I guess artwork instead of writing, but I know he kind of likes writing. So I hope, yeah. Well, that's cool. Because you have amazing, like your handwriting is really cool. Like just very cool handwriting. I mean, if everybody goes to your website, I think Planet Dust Industries, that's your handwriting, right? Yeah. And then like I got this bookmark from you.
Oh yeah, that's
love.
me. And the journals are also my handwriting. I can actually grab one.
Yeah.
This is I don't want to be normal.
Yeah. I love it. Yeah. You have really cool handwriting. Do you don't handwrite everything first, do you? Or do you type when you're writing? What do you do? What's your process?
I do handwrite
everything.
Yeah, I definitely,
because it's the journaling.
Yeah, it's the journaling, and then I just I don't know, I just if I have a paper, I kind of will just find little.
Yeah, you're like the artist who doodles everywhere. You're the writer, you write everywhere, right? I love it. No, I love it.
You can see my written. These are 4 pieces I'm working on. A shirt, or no, that's actually.
Oh, your shirt.
And then if you can see it, this is a shower curtain.
Oh my God.
And I can just kind of wipe it down. I just do my morning brainstorms. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's just
That's so cool.
And again, this comes from the philosophy of working with what you got. Like if you have a manic mind, you got to run it. Mm-hmm. I love languages. Yeah. I love to listen or to speak or to even sometimes write in Spanish or German. So you run it with all the writing. There's some times where I'm just I don't feel really grounded right now. What am I going to do? Oh, I will touch a pen. I will hold that pen, feel that pen with me. And then I will write. And just that physical expression is a very grounding practice. So again, everything can be medicine. My entire writing practice serves my mental health.
Right.
And
is it almost like a meditation sometimes? Like you get into a meditative state?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do. I have a friend. I have a very good friend. And he is Venezuelan. We were flatmates in London in 2002, 2003. And we were sharing this tiny, 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 tiny studio. And he's also an artist and a DJ. And so I would come home, and at the time he was working on like mosaics or like paper art, and he always played drum and bass, always played hard drum and bass. But I would come home and I would just be like so inspired by that process. Because bearing in mind, like even being an artist or artistic was not something that like was very well received growing up in northern New Jersey, because it's like, if you can't make money from it, or it's not some physical time, tangible kind of work, like what are you even doing, So I remember living with this guy in London and coming home, and if we had like a 10 by 10 studio, it was tiny. I was a university student. He was just there, for a couple months. It would be like floor to ceiling covered in paper, whether it was my words or it was like his. He would do like big mosaics and whatever, always really hard drum and bass. And like he would go into this meditative state for hours. And I remember being like, this dude is not even human. Like, it was amazing to me. And so ever since then, that's where I got the idea to like go big. I would just go to the dollar store and like get rolls of wrapping paper and tape all of our walls. And so he would just be like, cutting over here, and I'd be like, la, la, la. And,
gosh, that was such a cool roommate to have. Like, you guys,
Yeah. So the process was so inspired by that. And to this day, I'll be like, yo, Leo, throw me some tracks. And be like, I don't have anything, he will send me music or this drum and bass stuff. And I could like easily lose 5 or 6 hours in a meditative state, just like letting whatever come through.
That's awesome. Wow.
Yeah. You can find inspiration everywhere, like who knew?
Yeah. But the fact, like how you guys worked together, but separately, like you're both doing your own thing, but you like flowed. It was like meant to be. You lived with him. Like a lot of people don't, and he's like when they get a roommate, it's not always like a soulmate. It sounds like a little bit like he was like one of your soulmates.
I definitely told him he's been my muse, because, I can't really, there's only maybe one other living situation that I've been in that was like a purely artistic, like sparring. But part of that process means that like you kind of go into your own thing. Like you can be inspired by other people, but then like at a certain point, like you kind of go off and go, okay, well, what do I do with everything I talked about and saw and what's going on? So.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting too. Maybe this is where I kind of like bring in the market and the capitalist thing, because inevitably, if I'm working with someone and it's the first time, and I say, we're going to write, they're going to say like, but I'm not a writer. Get out of here with that stuff. You think language and words are your currency. But I think people are so trained to think in terms of value. Okay, like, if I sit down and I write, what's going to be the value of the writing? Can I sell it? I'm not going to be a real writer. I'm not going to be a published writer. What does it even matter? Like, okay, so maybe you don't want to associate with the label of being a writer, but like being artistic, being in that creative process, being in that generative state of mind is almost just like taking out your trash. Like you are a human. Maybe you don't do it professionally for money, but who cares? Like if you enjoy, spending 3 hours a night doing watercolors on your porch, then do it. Maybe something of an expression will come through, and maybe you just see color on paper and that's what you needed, And so I feel like already right there, we start to go in with the lesson of just how much we've embodied this capitalistic mindset or market mindset. I knew when I was going to publish meta work, I knew I was going to do it myself. Not just because I make books and I like to make books, but because I didn't want a gatekeeper, and I didn't want someone telling me, we allow you to put this into the world. Publishing is making books with like the Mean Girl Club. That's not
Yeah.
always being Dog Club, but like, like someone else has to approve your work, validate you. And I'm
Right.
like, no. So for everyone who is disabled or who does not have a normative experience, who maybe doesn't possess all of the faculties, who doesn't always have a clear state of mind, where are our voices at the table? I think a lot of people wait, or I think a lot of people are spoken for because the market has to look a certain way. You have to make a certain amount of money off of whatever this book is. And, like I can think of professional writers like Melissa Broder, who writes about mental health stuff, and it's just like gut wrenching and awful. But like, it's what she's willing to put out and be vulnerable with on the page. But it's also crafted into a saleable form. I in some ways, I don't think my work is sellable because people go like, I don't know what this is. I actually there was an editor before you who is a professional editor who read it. And I was like, I don't know what this is. I can't work on it. Like, okay. It was a hard pass because there was part of me that was like, I really wanted the validation from this person. This person works with material related to mental health. So I'm like, you're on this. But okay, that just made me go, what am I doing this for? Do I believe in myself enough? And do I give myself enough permission to put this out there? Am I going to make a lot of money on this? No. Am I going to maybe bring some consolation, some peace and happiness? Am I going to be able to tell someone, hey, I'm like you too. Now you got community. You got a community of one. We don't know each other, but we're cool. You're not alone. Does that bring that person a little bit closer to the peace and joy that is their nature, but that living in this time and age takes away.
Yeah.
So I did.
That's so true. Yeah. And I just thought about that, like, oh, or I do feel like that is changing though. But more and more people are self-publishing, and it's not like, back in the day, like, are you published? Well, I'm not published. And it's like they need that validation. Like, do you approve? Do you like me?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
And how many people did that restrict from getting their messages out or their stories out?
Yeah.
It's sad. It's actually sad. But that's awesome. And I guess, also too, just like what you're saying with the, marketable and fitting inside of a box, like the non-Jackie editor, was probably in that mindset of what, she was trained to be, and it has to be this way, and that's it. And I'm hoping too, with like all the stuff with COVID, I hope that it's opened people's eyes up to that, the new normal, there's just different ways of doing things now, so.
And that we're all interconnected because, a lot of what I explore in transpersonal psychology is just how much there's a field effect. Like if you're working on yourself and you feel a little bit better, you're a little bit nicer to the next person that you see walking down the street. And then that person's a little bit nicer. And then it's not all entirely a garbage dumpster fire. Like we kind of have to hold each other. And we're working, on half full, because our earth is, there's hurting, and society and all this politics and division, okay, cool. But we still have to be here and somehow find calm and stillness in this chaos. And so I'm just like, if I can make one person smile, then maybe a domino effect. And we don't need to go down the whole line, just maybe one or two people, and then I call it good. Because I'm not, like Gandhi, and but. And I think that, like, going back to what you were saying, too, about publishing and being like, oh, I'm not good enough or whatever. Like, I think that most people think they want to have, like, the next great work or, to have some serious cash, coming in from writing. But I think if you go into that, if you go deeper into the feeling behind that experience, I think really what it is, like you said, is validation. So then it's like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, like, okay, so maybe this book didn't live up to my like inflated expectations and didn't really feed my ego, but did someone else read it and see, you know, then, so that's where self-publishing becomes like punk as heck, because like we're DIYing the culture. We're putting ourselves and representing ourselves in all voices. You know, really the lack of access is related to lack of resource, or maybe like the idea that like you can put yourself out there, but like there's tons of voices, and I look forward to eventually, big dream, you know, like working with more people, like maybe outsider artists, or like looking at different kinds of work that they're producing and having it in its raw form, reflecting the inner space with a little bit of a narrative arc. But yeah, but all of this is about being validated, as in being seen, bearing witness. And then once you have that, then it's like, oh, I got my little hug. Okay. You know, then maybe who cares if it doesn't, you know, turn into something bigger. I put myself out there and I just want to be seen.
And speaking of being seen, why don't you tell everybody this story you did tell me before we started recording, when you traveled and found a little fan club.
Okay. Let me back up and tell you the little story about my recent trip to Europe. And it's also a little bit bigger too, because I don't think it's in meta work. It's definitely in 713, but I had been going to university in London in 1999, and then in 2001, I dropped out to travel, but I dropped out and I told my friends there that like, I'm going to travel. I'm going to be a writer. Like, you know? And I wanted to see the world, and these were all very supportive people. There were a lot of, international or third culture kids, people who had like been born one place, had a parent from one country, but like were living in another. And so identity to them was just as fluid as it was to me, except that my identity questions at the time just came from instability and, you know, the depression and the mania, like that. So, okay, so that's the big setup. So one of those nuggets was getting married in Europe. And, he lives in Europe. He lives in Austria now. And so I said, yeah, I'd love to come to the wedding. And, right before I left, it had just been a rough weekend in New Orleans. The city is tough. It hit hard. And so by the time I was on the plane, I was like, oh my God, I don't even know if I emailed him my flight details. Like, I'm flying into Zurich, and I'm just like, I hope I can get to Austria. Is someone going to be there to pick me up? I was just so out of it. And I was like I say, Swaha, I let it go. I'll figure it out. Whatever. So then I get there, and I was traveling with my dog, and I was like, oh, like I want everything to go well, and I just want to get there. Right? And so I get there, it's 8:00 in the morning in Zurich, and I clear border patrol, I clear customs, and I'm like, oh, that was easy. I was like, all right, now how do I find my friend Chris? I turn around out this door. And Zurich is big. You know, you use the trains to get around to the different terminals. I turn out the door, and there's a big goofy dude standing there like, oh, hey. And I'm like,
oh my God.
What? And he's like, yeah, wow. I missed the exit for the car park, so I just pulled up on the curb right here. And I was like,
oh my gosh. Wow.
So then I was like,
that's amazing.
Okay, universe, I see what you did here. There's something charmed about this trip. Because, you know, and again, I've been doing this master's program, which is in London, but I live in New Orleans, Louisiana. So massive time difference. And I still do work for an advertising agency in Manhattan. So I was just like just frazzled, peak frazzled. Right? Yeah. So I get there and I'm just like, all right, you know, and he has been always such a massive supporter of my writing and my work. And he was even asking me about pieces that I had read at open mics at university that I was like, I don't even remember that, you know, like I don't even have like the hard disk. Like, I don't think these pieces actually exist anymore. Right. But he knew, because I'm always playing with that perspective of like reader, writer, what's on the page, what's out there. He's been so supportive the whole way. And so I'm like, I had my hula hoop, I had my dog. I was like, cool, bro, you're getting married. I'll just do the ceremony. I'll hang out and hoop, I don't know who's going to be there, whatever. So I get there and I get to Austria and we are going to the location of the venue, which is very far up in the Alps. And so you have to take a train and you have to get like a private shuttle, et cetera, et cetera. So Chris is like, oh yeah, like I gave your book to my sister-in-law and blah, 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 blah. And I was like, wait, what? He's like, oh yeah, I got it. I ordered it off your website. And I was like, wait, what? He's like, oh yeah, and I can't find your other one because it's out of print, isn't it? And I'm like, oh, so going from this like super frazzled, like just like, I gotta get stuff done. I got it. Like, it's just like that shift into presence and also like, oh, right. And in addition, I mean, like we've visited before over the, past couple of years, but I'm like, oh, right. And like, at this point, I've known this dude for like 20 plus years. Like, it's just like that he's followed this, like, it meant a lot. That landed really well. So I get there and we get to the shuttle and I'm like, oh, is that? I'm like, oh, kind of looks like my other friend from university. And I was like, oh my God, it is. And then he turned and like another friend. So in total, 4 of my university friends were there that I had no idea. So I felt like I was just being received into this huge bubble of love.
Awesome.
And in addition, out of our friend group, because their partners were there, their partners plus me, there's 9 people. 4 of us are in mental health, right? 2 of them are psychotherapists, 1 of them was a psychoanalyst, and then there's me as the guy. So we were having a lot of really amazing conversations, eventually. But so they're there, and I was like, I didn't know, and this was all great, right? And then I was like, cool. So now I have people to hang out with. And then I noticed a box of fire toys that was sitting, waiting to be loaded onto the bus. So like wands and like toy sticks and like stuff that you light on fire and dance with. And I was like, I don't know what those are, but like, I'm going to be friends with them. Like, we're going to be, we're going up into the mountains. We're going to be besties, right?
Yeah.
So I go up to this woman standing next to the box and I don't know her. And I say, okay, English or German? She has this look on her face and she goes, it doesn't matter. And I was like, oh, okay. Well, hi, my name is, and she stopped me. She goes, and I was like, what? So it turns out she had read the book. She had read Metawork.
So cool.
And she said that it made her feel less alone and it helped her move through some things. And because I had kind of like, I was there for the wedding and I had been stressed out. And I just didn't expect to have this reception. And when we were, we were like, what is my book doing in the freaking Austrian Alps, right? It's just there out on the table. Awesome. They're just like, will you sign it? And I'm like, what is this? Like, what is going on here, right? But it also...
Surprise, it wasn't a wedding.
Yeah.
It was a total
it was like
celebration
like,
for you.
Get back on track, like it was so amazing. Because now, 20 years down the line, we could all talk about our experiences. And it's not that, I needed anyone to say like, oh, like, good job because you did what you said you were going to do when you dropped out of school. But like, yeah, I'll take that. Good job,
Right.
But we just had this really incredible rolling discussion about language and just being in the world. And, it was really, really rich. And it did get me back on track because I had founded Planet Dust to, produce these works last August. August 19th is when I got the LLC from Louisiana. And then on August 27th, 28th, of course, Ida hit and I had to evacuate. So I at the time I had moved to New Orleans, in March, sold my camper van because the point was that doing grad school, like I need to reduce expenses, go just be vehicleless. Supposedly you can do that in New Orleans. In theory, you can. The buses don't always run. It's awful, but whatever. So then I was like, oh my God, like what how do I do this? You know, like we were in the middle of doing meta work. I think Sharon had just finished the ebook proof. And so I took my little Kindle, it's not a Kindle, it's a Fire. I was proofing the ebook, and I wound up meeting a stranger who was delightful. And we evacuated to Texas. She took me in her, she had an Airstream at the time. She was like, look, I can take you to Texas. We can go camp. And I was like, okay, you know? And so I literally published meta work from a table in the Galveston, Texas library.
Oh my gosh.
And so it was available immediately, but I was like in hurricane brain. Because we were gone a week. There was no power in my
survival
section.
mode. It's like,
yeah, absolutely. It was totally survival mode. And then like watching, New Orleans is a violent and incredibly dangerous city as it is, but then watching what little we could see, because like our friends who had stayed, their phones were down and everything. Like you just watching on the news what you could kind of see, and like, oh, the power grid fell. What? You know, like, so then meta work, instead of being this like rolling ball, I was just like, all right, boom, I did a book. What? Like, can I go back home? Like, can I live? You know, like,
right.
And then,
yeah, wow.
The shipment of books that I had ordered and paid for express delivery that should have been there in 3 days took about 6 weeks to get to me. I mean, it was just, I lost steam. Yeah. And then my graduate program started in December. So I was just like, okay, I did it. It's done.
Yeah.
And now I need to focus and figure out where, you know, like how this graduate stuff is going to work, you know, getting up at 2, 3 in the morning to be in seminars in London.
Oh my gosh.
But I'm doing it. So yeah. And so
you're doing it.
Yeah. So I know this was kind of like an interwoven story, but yeah. So that's really right. Going back to Europe, or being in Europe and having all this time and getting the feedback, and they let me know that, you know, multiple people have now received the book in Europe.
That's awesome.
I'm just like, yeah, you know what? It's worth giving it another go. I mean, I do have other autofiction that I'm working on. I do have other stuff that I'm working on, but returning to meta work, I think, is the right thing to do, because it says so much. And despite it being birthed in literally a hurricane, you know, like, so okay. So it got a little
out of chaos,
right? But then there is peace and there is ease. Yes. And then when people come up to me and know who I am, I was like,
that's amazing. That's awesome. Love it. I love that. I think I know this already, but you were talking about, you know, German or English. So I know you speak German, you speak Spanish. Anything else? Any other languages?
Well, you know, I chant in Sanskrit, but that's absolutely not, I'm not conversant in Sanskrit. Could I pick up a book and read? No. You know, even though it's not spoken much. You know, when I lived in London, this is my thing. When I lived in London, I used to hang out with a bunch of Marxists on Friday nights before we would go out to the clubs, and they spoke Esperanto. So for a couple of years, yeah. Well, I
don't even know what that is.
This artificial language that was created by a doctor in the Jewish ghetto in Warsaw in like the 1940s.
Oh, wow.
But because there were so many different refugees and people living there because of the war, they couldn't speak. So it's kind of like a Lego.
They couldn't communicate.
And it sounds a little bit like Spanish, but it's really interesting as an experiment to be like, hold on, this dude like invented a language, and like, yeah. So I used to speak Esperanto. I don't speak it anymore, but I was just always really inspired by it as language, as a way to connect people, but also that these Marxists had hijacked it because they were just like, even language is politicized, you know, like you speak American English, you're already inserting privilege and white privilege and like Western privilege into a conversation. And I was like, get out of here. You know?
Yeah.
So,
wow.
Yeah. And it's, you know, it's been a while. Spanish and German, it could always be brushed up, but like, yeah, it's really fun to speak different languages because it's just like trying on different boxes of consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you find
Yeah.
so many different ways to say stuff, and like
Yeah.
Jhumpa Lahiri talks a lot about writing now in Italian. She started in, I think her native language is she's from Bangladesh. So she's got a native language from the Indian subcontinent. She speaks English and she writes in Italian. And she's like, the best way to know if you're othering someone is to write this in a different language. And so for my current work of autofiction that I'm working on, it's scenes flash, so small pieces, moments in time, flash from the global South, but really Latin America and South America. So global South is some spanky, distinction to say, like, if you have a certain economic level that's like meets the United States or it doesn't. Like, you're the global South if you're not producing and like at this like economic level. It's silly. But I did a lot of traveling in like Mexico, Colombia, Venezuela. So I wrote some scenes from there. And the idea is that it's going to be a DIY, like a choose your own adventure book, because I want to give people the experience of traveling. Do you talk to this person standing in the corner with like a machine gun?
I love that.
Right. But I've tasked myself with the impossible task of writing the flash in Spanish.
Spanish. Okay.
Yeah. Cause like, how much that's totally traveling. If you don't know the language, you're going to spend like 75 to 90% of your day going like, I don't know what anybody's saying. Right. And you got to like, some kind of currency to communicate.
Yeah.
And the idea to do this came from, well, I had a pile of flash from that part of the world that I wanted to do something with. But there's a travel writer named Bonnie Amor, and I believe they live in Queens, but they're from Ecuador. And they talk about fetishizing, like parts of the world that as exotic that you really shouldn't if you don't want to be disrespectful. Like, don't go to some country and then like show up and like, take over the entire situation or scene, having certain expectations and bringing your privilege there. And she's like, and they're like, and like, white people traveling to find themselves is like peak privilege. And I'm like, okay, I do not like how that sounds, but okay, you are very, I see the logic. So I wanted to explore that. And I'm so glad that I did, so I took some of this flash and I was like, okay, how can I simulate traveling? Because at first I was like, okay, I respond to that, but like, I want it to be like, you get to know other people and I always like to interact with like people who live wherever I'm going. I do sojourns, I do long stays. I don't stay in hotels most of the time. Like I'm different. Right? I'm better. So already
you're different.
Like,
yes.
Oh,
right.
Like I get it. I need to do this work, don't I? Like, okay. And then as I'm writing, I came to the hard truth that I was like, for a while I was traveling, just like manic traveling, and the hard truth was that like I couldn't stop. My mind wouldn't let me stop. And then for the different places I was living, I just wasn't safe in the way in terms of like intellectual stuff, like being safe starts to me with communication, with, that energy of being like, I can say whatever and you're not going to retort or gaslight or anything other than, oh, I hear what you're saying. Right. So I just realized, like I have all these big ideas and like big, and especially like the narrative that like a white girl can like safely travel across the world by herself with her backpack. And like, that's a loaded narrative to unpack and, things that weren't right with me. And so as I'm writing, I'm like, wow, here we go again. It comes back down to mental health, the idea of safety. And so even then within the form, the construction of doing a choose your own adventure book, I'm like, okay, like this actually adds to the lack of structure and like the crossed wires that ultimately I'm going to explore and show. And then I went a little deeper, and this is where I'm at now in the process, in that, you know, when you're so detached from the world, so I could have been traveling in Colombia and like, cool that, you know, I would hang out with the maid when she would come to the apartment that I was staying at, or like I used to hang out with the library guards and just like I would go to the library for hours every day. Like, cool that I did that, but like, how much am I still just mildly engaging with the environment? You know, when I feel like that where I am, like, is still some kind of like scene, and, you know, like, how much do I engage? What do I offer? Do I even need to be here? Do I even need to take 3 months to go to South America just because I feel like it, you know? That to me starts to make me think about resources and consumption and just really our lifestyle, that I can get on a plane or train or boat or bus or van, you know, and go places. That cool that I'm riding my van out into the desert and like I'm off grid because I've got solar and I'm working, you know, by myself and I ain't seen nobody in a week, right? But like, do we really need to do that? Is individualism just masking overconsumption? Right. So what started as an exploration of travel went to like, ooh, mental health stuff, and then, oh, where am I in this world as a person, as an individual, and ultimately, how do I fit into community? Can I make this community? Like, what is my legacy here? So it's a lot to explore in one work, but I feel like these are the questions that like lead to more questions, and I want my work to do that. I don't need to write you a book to have my point of view. Like, I want you to start that reflection and go like, oh, what is this for me?
Yeah. So, I love that.
Thank you.
That sounds awesome. And I love that. And I see now you're writing, well, it always has been, but your writing is you're doing in your writing what you do with people in the practice and in your transpersonal guidance. It's like,
yeah, it came together. Yeah, you're right. I mean, I agree. And it's not easy to explain. So thank you for that reflection. Well,
you're not just the teacher, you're the student.
No,
or something. I don't know. I'm trying to compare,
exactly.
Right?
Like,
yeah.
Thank you for that reflection, because like I could come up here and tell you that, but unless someone like gets it, you know, like writing can be service. Anything that you do can be service. Yeah. And that's where it comes from for me.
Yeah. That's great. I was just going to say, that was my last question. What is your daily practice? But it kind of, I mean,
yeah. I
don't know if you want to say, but you kind of said it, like when you're writing and
yeah, you know, that's a really interesting question. My practice, I think, best case scenario, or when I was based in the Hudson Valley, I would get up, walk the dog, and do a little bit of yoga or just movement. Sometimes yoga, sometimes hula hooping, you know, for 20 minutes, just something to like wake up the body and be like, okay, what's going on? We'll do 10, and then like a 10, 20 minute meditation. And so always with the movement, always with the meditation, and then always with a little bit of writing. And sometimes that, like, if I can't write or if nothing's coming, I'll just read for 5 minutes. Just always read, looking for inspiration. But being in New Orleans has changed that practice a lot. It's just a little harder to do things, especially with the summer. Like, if I don't get out and walk by like 8 o'clock in the morning, like it's too hot.
It's just too hot.
There's just like always something going on. Even at night, I went out last night at like it wasn't even late. It was like maybe 9 o'clock, 9:30 to throw my hula hoop around. And it was like buckets of sweat. So, and I don't, and also, yeah, there's just a lot of pollution, and I don't always have access. Like I had a few ashrams that I would just go and spend time at in the Hudson Valley, but sometimes I can go for a walk and just you see people who are unhoused and like their streets are blocked off and there's garbage and so what I'm saying is that sometimes.
So instead of when you get outside and you want to feel like you are, getting some fresh air, opening up, I feel like it's a little stifling.
Yeah, exactly.
Just with the atmosphere, with the air, with the heat. It's just, it's hard. That's definitely hard.
Not easy. And I had to really, So I was like, okay, well, what can I do? And I've got enough room. Actually, with the way I have stuff arranged, I can do a little bit of hooping inside, and but so I find that my practice now on my morning walks is just meditating, a walking meditation on can I be love?
So yeah,
can I be bhakti? Can I like radiate love as I walk down the street and I see cars with bullet holes drive by and like somebody's like strung out over there? Like, can I just like not look down, but like, can I for, 10 minutes or an hour, can I just say, I love this place unconditionally. That's awesome. Yeah. So it's not easy because my first, a lot of times I'm like, what do I know? But if that's the mind, but if I drop into the body, I mean, ultimately it could take me an hour, to get past that and get into the body. But, my teachers have said that being in relationship to other people is the highest form of spirituality. So like, cool, throw on your crystals, go meditate in the beautiful, pristine mountains, eat your organic food, but you just be right where you are, and so that has been something. And with the people that I know here and the things that I've done, my practice has really been, can you just be with the people that I've met? Like, how can you treat them with loving kindness? I mean, this is a super special, I have some writing that's not fully done yet, but like, this is a super special city, man. Like, it's not easy to live here, and everybody's got stories, and everybody, like every day something's going on, whether it's a shooting or like, I don't even know, so it's a really hard city to be in. And especially when I got here, my initial thoughts with my practice were like, ain't no fucking way. Like, what am I doing here? Like, I can't, I need my yoga. I need my organic, like, I need, and then I was like, it's evolved into more writing and more just fluid walking meditation of, okay, but can I just love it as it is?
Yeah.
And that's everything else.
That's, I hate to use this word, but it's beautiful. It really is. It's beautiful. What you just said. And you're trying to, instead of like hating it and just almost just going in, you're going into yourself, but you're also radiating out and trying, you really are immersing yourself into it by putting out the love instead of.
Because we have a choice, right? I could be a jerk. I could just be like, okay, it's just, this is just
disconnect
my journey. Yeah. Disconnect. And I'm like,
it's not me. This is not me.
No. It's like, how much more does it take? Like, it takes this much more effort to just be kind, and I don't have to be kind every day. And I'm not, like always in the mood to be kind.
Yeah. Right.
Also just love that anything that you're experiencing, this is what we learn in psychosynthesis, just be with it. Just be with it. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I think that's a good spot to end, even though I could talk to you for hours.
Delightful.
I know.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
You're welcome. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy, I'm sure, schedule and day.
Hustle and flow, babe. Hustle and flow. You're welcome.
All right. Well, why don't you just tell everyone where they can find you? I'll also put the links down in the description, but if you want to Say them out loud.
Yeah, thank you. So, my website, just Google me, AnastasiaWasko.com. Just like the Disney's princess, it's spelled ANASTASIAWASKO.com. Email me. You can book. I offer consultations. I offer group work. Getting on the mailing list, which you can sign up through my website. That's the best way to stay up to date. And yeah, just reach out. Like, tell me something good that you ate. And, be sure to, have a good belly laugh during the day. Tell me what made you laugh. Like, stuff like that. All stuff that we should be talking about, right?
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
Let's talk about that.
All right, everybody. So that's it. Thanks again.
Big love.
All right.